This is CinePunked. This episode, Red Pill or Blue Pill. In this edition of the CinePunked podcast, with Matrix Resurrections, the fourth installment in the legendary series, playing out on global cinema screens, and streaming service HBO Max in the US, we escape our current pandemic-ridden landscape and head straight into the rabbit hole once again. In 1999, cinemagoers the world over were first presented with a decision that would change the language of how we understand existence. We could choose to take a blue pill and continue to live in acceptance of the status quo, or we could take a red pill and wake to the reality of our true selves. Such was the crucial decision left to Mr. Thomas Anderson in the Wachowski's iconic picture, The Matrix. Over 20 years later, and the film's creators have declared the Matrix story to be an allegory for the transsexual experience, and yet it preaches a message which has been seized upon by many from all walks of life, from disparate religious, social and political positions. Which of us hasn't questioned our existence and its meaning and pondered the nature of dreams? Hi, I'm your host, Robert J. E. Simpson, and I'm joined in studio tonight by Ben Simpson.
Hello.
And Mr. Neil Sedgwick.
How's it going?
He's so laid back. You get him to officially join us as one of us now, and he's like, yeah, just take it all in my stride. So just from the off, I will say to our listeners and our viewers that this is a bit of a rare thing for us. We've done a re-record, which we never do on the show. We tend to kind of have a conversation and we go straight in with it. Now, Ben suggested that we cover The Matrix. He's quite keen that we do it, so we'll get into that in a wee second. But we recorded a version of this a few days ago, and we weren't happy with the way it went. We were up against some pressures of time, but we weren't really kind of exploring some of the stuff that was tickling our fancy. And we've done a rare thing. We've all collectively gone off and watched the film again and come back. So from the off, folks, if you haven't seen Matrix Resurrections, please go and watch it before you listen to the rest of this podcast, because there will be spoilers ahead. It is unavoidable. But also be aware that any of the conversation that we have tonight isn't informed just by our first viewing, it's informed by repeated viewing. And again, that is something that we don't always get a chance to do. So there is a little bit more information I think that we were able to tease out. He says that. Let's see how this goes over the next hour or so. So, Ben, you suggested that we cover Matrix Resurrections. Yeah. I suppose the question maybe to start off with is why the interest? And also, how did you come to the Matrix in the first place? I mean, were you ready for a revisit at this stage?
You mean, was I ready for a fourth movie?
Yeah, I mean, did you feel that 20 years was enough time to pop back into the Matrix, or could you have happily left it for another 20, or indeed never gone back?
To be honest, whenever obviously I seen the first one, I can't even remember how I seen it. I think I watched a movie of it. You know, like went down to Extravision or something like that one night on a Friday after school with Mum, and you know, the way we used to do those movie nights on a Friday after school. I think we watched it then. Not 100%, but I don't remember going to the cinema for any of them. So I think it was all sort of either that, or I went away and found it myself and watched it. But whenever, like, I rewatched all three of them. The first three again, because I heard that there was going to be a fourth one. And I was like, man, I really want to go see that in the cinema. Before watching it, I watched all three of them. I watched them while I was in isolation, which was a good time to watch anyway, because it's quite long if you're going to marathon all three of them, even this fourth one. It was quite long too. But I haven't watched it again, the latest one. Like, I have to say, I did enjoy it. The reason why I wanted to do it or suggested it in the first place is because of its impending arrival. And I thought it would be a good thing for us to look at, considering it's sort of forward-leading take that it took in movies and the ideas that it generated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with certain cinematography and even CGI stuff that they sort of help sort of pioneer a way forward in that direction. So, you know, I thought it would be a good thing. And then obviously after it coming out and then hearing some mixed reviews, I thought it would be important for us to have a look at.
Are you suggesting, Ben, that there was potential for us to have conflict over this film?
Well, yes, or at least talk about it in a way that, you know, we at CinePunked like to do. You know, we don't. I think that we don't just come at it at one angle. There's many different angles that we come at a movie, a viewing of a movie, or even talking about a movie at. So I thought it would be the prime candidate for us to do such a thing.
I guess that's something else that I'm going to acknowledge from our conversation the other day was that we finished up that session sort of with the idea that the film was trying to tell us something. And it's like, okay, let's go back and watch the film again with the knowledge that it's trying to tell us something and see where it goes. Now, we'll come to that shortly. I'll also kind of note that if you're in the US, this has been on streaming services online. In the UK, it was released as a cinema exclusive, and there were issues about that. It's also become one of the most pirated films ever and has brought an end, apparently, to Warner Brothers' dual approach, which they've used during the pandemic to release stuff in cinemas and on streaming services at the same time. But folks, wherever you are, I mean, you know, it is still playing in cinemas as we record this. So if you can, get yourselves out to a big cinema screen and just be blown away by it.
I might actually go watch it for a third time in the cinema if I can get a chance.
Even better, yeah. Neil, how about you? How did you come to the Matrix first?
I didn't see the first one in the cinema. There was a lot of hype around it at the time, and I picked up a DVD when DVD eventually came out, watched it and loved it. There was also a lot of negative press around the first time around to do with that lobby scene and that kind of trench coat and all the guns and stuff. In unfortunate timing with a lot of school shootings in America, there was a few where they basically used that first Matrix as a bit of a, you know, well, the kids are watching this is what we're going to get, you know, that type of messaging, which is really unfortunate. But yeah,
it was Columbine was 1999 as well, with the trench coat mafia, so called.
Yeah.
So obviously that happened. I mean, Ben, I don't even know if you remember this. As a major school shooting, it also influenced the film Elephant that we talked about on one of our earliest live events. There's a podcast out about it too, the Gus Van Sant film, and also the Alan Clark Northern Irish set original. But if you know, that obviously had a huge impact then. So for those of you who maybe are too young to remember this stuff, that film came out, Columbine happens at the same time. Trench coats were central to these sort of massacre things.
Yeah, really, really, really unfortunate. But I remember it kind of, in some ways, when those things happen, they create even more hype for a film. In the sense of, if you don't know about the Matrix film and then that event happens, a talking head pops up on the news and goes, well, the Matrix influenced this clearly. You go, well, what is the Matrix? I need to see that. So there is a bit of that kind of spin that happens with these things, unfortunately. But yeah, so the first one, I absolutely loved it. I saw the second and third one in the cinema because of my love for the first one. The second one, Matrix Reloaded, has a cliffhanger at the end that is one of the few times in recent memory where I've kind of gone, oh my goodness, I have to see the third one of this. And then the third film, Matrix Revolutions, is a massive disappointment in terms of that original trilogy. There's just a lot of clanging and banging of shooting of machines, and it becomes essentially more of a war film. Whereas the first two, while they have their action, there's still a lot of the philosophical meanderings about what is reality, what is real, what does it mean to be human. and the third one just goes, "Aye, all that stuff," but also on a massive scale.
I like you wouldn't do the noise for Transformers transforming, but you will happily do the sound of a machine gun.
terribly. And I have always loved them, and like Ben, I did a rewatch of the three within 24 hours, I think. And yeah, there's a bit of diminishing returns from those first couple of sequels, but
so were you ready then to go back into a fourth one?
Not necessarily. No, I think there's enough of a flow and enough of a cutoff point at the end of the third one to go.
Yeah.
If that book doesn't get opened again, I'd
be happy. Yeah.
But I didn't. Whenever they announced that a fourth one was happening, I didn't have a visceral reaction of, "Oh no, you can't do that because that's perfect and you should never go back," and blah blah. Like a lot of, you see a lot of this, particularly in film Twitter, where it's like, "Oh, you shouldn't touch that. It's perfect as it is. Leave it alone." Blah blah blah. And it's like, I still have enough time and affection for the characters and also the concepts and the ideas to go. The ideas in play are particularly interesting enough to go, well, where do you go now? And it is left open at the end of the third one, where you have Santine say to the Oracle, will we ever see him again? And the Oracle says, I think we absolutely will. I'm paraphrasing there. Forgive me for the purists who love an exact quote, but that's the vibe at the end of it.
We were afraid we might not find you.
Everything's okay now.
Look!
Just look at that. Beautiful. Did you do that?
For now.
That's nice. I know he'd love it.
Will we ever see him again?
I suspect so. Someday.
But again, close the book, and it doesn't really matter if you don't, but equally, there's a chink of light there that you can get through to something new, which is where we land. And I went to see it in cinema, and I tweeted as soon as it finished, "This gave me all my cinema-going vitamins."
You did say that. I remember reading that.
I had a great time. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really clever. It had good action. It had all that thought and pondering back that I really enjoy. So I'm glad it's here. I didn't necessarily need it, but I'm glad it's here.
And I've watched it twice. It says a lot. I suppose in the interest of fairness, I should sort of explain myself. I didn't see it when it initially came out, and actually just double checking there, Columbine happened exactly just a month before Matrix hit cinema screens in the US. So I do not remember the connection between those two, but it strikes me that there must have been one, which is fascinating looking back after 20 years. But I didn't see it when it hit the cinema screens initially. I wasn't very good at going to the cinema when I was 18, just because I couldn't afford it. I was a poor person, and I spent my money on DVDs and videos and stuff instead of going to the cinema because I wanted to keep films, not just see them once. So I think it was when I was at uni. I must have probably been towards the third one coming out, and a friend of mine lent me the DVD because he loved it and talked about it all the time. I think that's what happened, and I watched it. And it was okay, but I felt very underwhelmed. I didn't really get what all the fuss was about. And then I didn't see the second one, and I think I must have seen the third one in a cinema. And I really wasn't taken with it. And obviously, because I'd missed the second one, some of the plotting didn't necessarily make sense to me. So it's taken me until just before Christmas to rewatch the trilogy and finally watch it back to back and kind of make sense of the whole thing. And I felt that the criticisms that come in for the sequels, it's probably not as deserved. I mean, they are not as powerful as the first one. The first one, even 23 years later, still feels like quite an inventive, quite an original, quite a groundbreaking film. 2 and 3, you feel a bit like, okay, there's a bit more sci-fi, and it feels a bit more like it feels more like an alien film, which kind of, for me, is deeply unsatisfying. I find all that stuff still the least interesting bits about it. When they're in the Matrix, I am happy. when they're out of the Matrix, I am not happy. And going into the fourth, I feel exactly the same. Now, I mean, I was quite happy to see a fourth one. I was curious whenever they announced that it was happening. And then the same friend who lent me the DVD, actually, lucky little shit that he is, had to deliver a costume to the set of The Matrix. Took it from Northern Ireland to go to San Francisco just to deliver a costume. This was just before the first of the lockdowns. And I was so jealous, but it's like there's this sort of Matrixy connection. Yeah, no, I mean, like it's an interesting film. I'm happy to have seen it. I've got a lot more out of it seeing a second time. There's a lot of stuff in it that I find quite interesting.
We can't see it, but we're all trapped inside these strange repeating loops.
Billions of people just living out their lives, oblivious.
But this is the moment for you to show us what is real. I remember this.
So deja vu. And yet it's obviously all wrong. Maybe this isn't the story we think it is.
They taught you good. Made you believe their world was all you deserved. But some part of you knew that was a lie. Some part of you remembered what was real.
It's so easy to forget how much noise the Matrix pumps into your head. Something else makes the same kind of noise. War. What happens to Neo? The most important choice in Neo's life. It's not his to make.
She believed in me. It's my turn to believe in her.
Part of me feels like I have been waiting my whole life for you.
If you want to see Trinity again, fight for her!
I saw this in a dream. My dream ended here.
I still know Kung Fu.
But I mean, the first thing that always strikes me is sort of the religious elements of it. You know, there's a very definite religious plotting that still feels there, and I guess that's the inevitability if you take him as a kind of Christ-like figure, which he is. He's like a superhero Christ. You know, when you talk about Kevin Smith's Buddy Christ, yay. I mean, it's like Buddy Christ with the power to like move entire things, you know, like, hey, yeah, my turn to do noises. I mean, that's kind of how it feels. And then obviously when he dies, I mean, the inevitability of a Christ-like figure is Christ has to be resurrected in order for the story to progress and for meaning to be found. So it always felt like that would happen. I just didn't think it would take 20 years or 60 years in the narrative of the film. Yeah.
Can I tell you a funny story about how Christians tried to manipulate the Matrix?
Please do, Neil.
So I was
Neil Sedgwick from Films and Faith.
Yeah, the lapsed. Some people, dear listener, will tell you I'm completely lapsed and an absolute heretic. So
you're
a
backslider who has no right to say anything about faith now, isn't that it?
In some quarters, I was at an event, not long after me, probably 2000. let's say in around 2000 at a large scale Christian event where they showed the clip of the original pill moment, take the red pill, take the blue pill. And then this became watered down into accepting Jesus as your Lord and Savior. At which point people appeared with sorted buckets of Smarties into red and blue. And dear love them, whoever, like, I will say this, whoever sorted the Smarties into red and blue, bless your good intentioned hearts, because that must have been horrendous. But they brought these around then and gave these to you as an offering to, come to Christianity, a real come to Jesus moment. So they clipped that bit out and they used it as this. I took a handful of blue Smarties and put them in my mouth. Even though I had been a Christian from 16, but I felt it was such emotional manipulation. I just wanted to look in the eyes of the person holding the bucket and just kind of go nom, 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 like that, to let them know how annoyed I was by the whole thing. Because when you clip something like that,
you take it out of context.
You take it completely out of context. It doesn't tell the whole story. It doesn't do anything. It just suits your narrative. And it's something that has actually happened recently with all these Matrix films, Red and Blue Pill, in terms of COVID and taking your vaccine or not, and wake up to the reality around you and all this here. And it's a really dangerous thing to do with anything, films, music, or dare I suggest Bible verses, to just clip them and use them to fit the message you're putting out there. But yeah, there is obviously that that savior narrative, that Messiah bit that's in it. Yeah, but Neo's killer because, as far as I know, Jesus never flew. So I don't have it. Like I mean, like I say, I'm decried as a heretic in some quarters, but
getting burnt for blasphemy now.
Well, there was. Well, to be fair, there was an ascension thing. Not to get into theology too far, there was an ascension, but not kind of punch to the ground and zoom up into the air, looking awesome.
I don't know. I mean, just because they didn't describe it like that. I mean, paper was a limited resource back then. I mean,
can't tell. We weren't there.
Exactly. I mean, maybe he did it like Neo. I mean, I love the idea of sort of. I find it fascinating that there's this kind of position where you've either got to take the pill or you're not going to take the pill, and that by taking it, you're somehow being counter. That you're being the bold one by kind of going against reality, by experiencing your own reality, and going against the flow. And then what you have done in that moment is to kind of do the opposite, which is like, well, if everybody's doing that, then surely to take the other thing is what is in fact the going against the flow. It's an act of independence. It's a really strange one, and the manipulation that there's been with it in terms of the politics and COVID and all the rest about, like, who really are the sheeple? Are the sheeple the people that take the red pill, or are they the people that take the blue pill?
That's something that actually comes up in the conversation where, and again, typical us, like, we're jumping all over the place, but you have this.
Sorry, you want me to do this linearly?
You have within Matrix Resurrections this character Bugs, who is wonderful, by the way, and she talks about the moment she was presented with the pill, and she says. And again, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, I was presented these two pills as the only possible option. And the woman laughed at me because the choice was already made. Something along those lines. And it's like, the choice isn't anything to do with the actual pill. The pill isn't the gateway, I suppose. It's a visual representation, but it's actually the human will to move to an acceptance of being within a matrix that takes you out of it. It's got it. So
the pill's a placebo.
Well, that's what I felt she was saying in that moment, that the pill actually doesn't matter because you've already made the choice. The choice will already be known. So it's a question of, in some ways, awakening consciousness rather than anything medical that the pill does to do that. Or at least that's what I took from that moment. So
I mean, we've given the episode title "Red Pill or Blue Pill" because I think it is a fundamental moment that defines the Matrix just as much as bullet time. I think there's two things: bullet time and the red pill, blue pill, and that central conceit seems to be the thing that everything else hangs upon about our acceptance of our reality or not. I want to kind of get into that a little bit further. In terms of, well, I mean, presented with that situation yourselves, I mean, which pill do you take, Ben? Do you take the red pill or the blue pill?
Oh, jeez.
Yes, we're doing philosophy today.
Accept truth or deny truth.
Which is the truth, though? I mean, is there not a question within this in terms of what actually is truth?
Well, in this movie, like, Neo, it does come up about choices and options and what is reality. It's referenced numerous times. Morpheus in this movie.
Fake Morpheus.
Constantly says, that's not much of an option. He says that a couple of times. Neo, whenever he's being escorted by Shepard to his little room, Shepard says to Neo, oh, I can't believe you're real. And Neo says, oh, there's that word again.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what is real? Is the Matrix real? Is it not? Is outside of the Matrix real? Is it not? Is it a matrix within a matrix within a matrix? I think that's up to the individual. What state their mind is in. Obviously, Neo in this is being tormented by his past. So he thinks he's going crazy from the get-go. And first time he sees Morpheus to go, you're not real. I programmed you, He said, well, touch me. Here I am. Obviously, he's touching him in the Matrix, but he was in his Matrix that he created. So it's like, there's different layers of reality here. And,
So you don't know which pill you want to take?
I'll take both of them. Just give me them both.
The purple pill.
The purple pill, exactly.
I want to stay here, but give me an itty bit of truth.
Yeah.
I mean, that question about truth, though, is one that I think this film does explore a lot. And I think watching this the second time, I was much more conscious of that element of truth, also within the sense of sort of trans identity. Potentially. Now, I mean, we've agreed within ourselves that we are not the people really to explore trans issues within this film because the three of us are not trans. Nonetheless, it is something that the Wachowskis have come out and said the Matrix is about, and so therefore we would be completely disingenuous of us if we said that there's no to completely ignore the trans issues. But in sense of an identity, in sense of who you are and how you navigate the world, it's like those two realities are not necessarily separate. They coexist. There's that point where in the film they talk about the building of Io. Zion basically was a world in which us and them existed. It was us and then the simulants, but Io could only exist with the two coming together. And it's like, for me, that whole element is like, you need the two worlds in order to be able to function. And as a human being and as a trans person, it's not a denial of either aspect of oneself. It's a kind of acceptance that those two things do coexist. Maybe we can tease that out during the rest of this conversation. But I think for me, which pill would I take? I don't know. I quite like the idea. I mean, I think the idea of the red pill is that we don't really like our current existence, and we're convinced that there's something more. And whether the red pill exists in a sort of to represent religion or politics or whatever else. Maybe I'd like a little bit of it. Maybe like Ben, I think the purple pill's the way to go.
Yeah.
Neil?
I'm a red pillar. I would like to get to the truth and be able to do all the cool flips. Why walk around in the world? Why just plod down like Great Victoria Street when you could run up the side of a building to go around people in the street? Do you know what I mean? Like, why would you not want to do that?
Yeah.
It's really busy in this aisle 4 of Tesco, the frozen food. Just punch down into the ground, zoom up, and go to the toiletries. Why would you not want to be able to do that?
But you have to be the one to be able to do that, though.
Well,
do you?
Yes.
Neil never question.
Neil doesn't believe in the one.
Yes, but other people did.
He affirms it in this film, though. He never believed in the one. Other people, which is again very Christ-like. It's like, I am who you say I am, or whatever the exact phrasing is. It's like Jesus himself never sort of says, yes, I'm the Messiah. It's not for him to say that. Other people say it. It's almost like there's an element of like, I'm not 100% on board with this.
So I had this thought today that original Morpheus, Lawrence Fishburne, is as much the one as Neo is, or arguably Trinity, which we'll get to later. But without the incredible belief of Morpheus that Neo is the one, Neo never becomes the one.
Yeah, but he starts to believe.
So he's
beginning to believe.
Morpheus has to be at least part of the one in order to be the catalyst for that belief.
Well, he's John the Baptist, isn't he?
You know what I mean? Yeah, if you're going to go down the biblical route, probably.
I feel like we can't.
I've come to prepare the way. That shtick.
But that is Morpheus. I mean, that is essentially what he does. I mean, he tells everybody he is convinced of this. He preaches the truth of the one. Oh gosh, I didn't plan on this being so religiously heavy, but it's just like the more I've pondered about this over the last few days, the more obvious it is that that the religious allegory is as important as the trans allegory, as important as anything else, which creates its own fascinating kind of prospects, but I'll leave that for somebody else to get into. But if that's his job, I mean, then yes, I mean, does the one have to exist? Is the one an actual physical personification, or is it like the pill? Is it, is it simply a way of thinking that enables you to be able to achieve whatever it is you have to do for yourselves?
Or can we all be the one in our own way? So
I'm definitely one.
I'm definitely a right one. One of the parallels about this, because one of the comments about this film is that it has retreaded an awful lot and just swapped characters around and redone the first film. And the parallel to that, I suppose, is the recent Star Wars films. And when you get into those recent Star Wars films, there is the thing that annoyed a lot of people was the possibility that, everybody could have a wee bit of force in them if they just kind of click into the right energy or get the vibes right. There's the potential for anybody to have the force within them. The force lies within everybody. You have to tap into it. So to flip back to the Matrix, then it is possible to kind of put into that context that everybody has the potential to be the one, because everybody has certain abilities within it. So everybody who plugs in gets to do all the cool flips and the kung fu and all the rest of it that we assume prior to that they never could. They don't quite get to do it to the same extent. They don't quite get to do the same things, but they have abilities. They are told they download all these programs and all this stuff, but in the search for truth, do they? Or have they just tapped into something that
was already there?
Yeah, that is already there. Now, I have a bucket of blue Smarties and red Smarties.
I mean, it's an interesting one because obviously, for us to say that the Matrix is the fiction and the other world is their reality, is a bit, I think, misleading because there's a very clear connection between those two worlds. You see them, they physically interface with that world. I mean, the spike that they get into their skulls physically connects them, but whenever they get beaten up or killed in the Matrix, you see them suffering corresponding injuries in the real world. This isn't a psychological thing. This is something that is a physical, visceral reaction. So which is the reality? I mean, I find that slightly more blurred than they would like us to believe.
Yeah, like it could completely melt your head. This is where this idea of, I think part of the trans allegory lives within the binary choices of this film. So a traditionalist view would be, you've got a binary choice here. You're one or you're the other. And the truth is, no, that's not how it works in some cases. And so I think you're right. I think there's a lot of stuff in here around what is the binary, what is truth, what is false, what is real, what is virtual, what is physical, what is mental. There's a lot the whole way through all these films. Binary choices are being played with and explored and stretched to help parse out that trans allegory, which I'm very conscious I'm probably not explaining very well, and I'm not the guy to do it, but forgive my garbled kind of minimalization of anything within that world. But that's something that, and particularly in this final movie, I think he's building a game called Binary, for goodness sake. The whole thing is like yelling down the camera at you about this stuff. And when I say yelling down the camera at you, I don't mean in a shoving it down your throat way. I think it is, and again, this might come from the benefits of a rewatch and a fairly close back-to-back rewatch. But it is telling you things the whole way through this film to try and explain itself to you if you choose to tune into it. But what we found on the internet is that people go, "Oh, it's all woke, lefty, liberal crap and nonsense and blah 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 blah," and they've just shut off because they've picked their binary position on it. It's lefty, liberal, wokeism. I'm out. And the truth is that when you actually are prepared to explore and expand your vision or your understanding or your learning, you're going to find so many more layers to not just this film, any film, for example.
Well, let me just jump off on that. So, first of all, I mean, you've just made a point about there is stuff there that is teaching us or telling us. Now, one of the things we talked about the other day when we three were chatting together was about the idea that this film is trying to tell us something. Now, Ben in particular, I think you had a bit of an eye-opener moment at the end of our last conversation, and went back into this with the knowledge that there is a message in here. What has the second experience of the film done for you in terms of your understanding of it?
Well, I really did see that whole social media sort of aspect of things like shine through, but then I got like little other things like the rant that your man goes on whenever Neo comes back into the Matrix after being freed, and he meets Agent Smith or Smith, and Smith goes, I've brought somebody with you, and the French guy comes out. I can't remember his name. The what is it?
Merovingian?
Yeah.
Right.
That guy and your man, he's spitting out all this stuff about, you know, you and your bloody games, and, you know, people are just tapping, and, you know, we used to have conversation and books and good movies and original ideas. You know, it's like, it's really meta.
He also makes it.
I don't know. No, I don't think so. But like, you know, you think about it, like people really, if you look at it from your own personal stance, some people are hooked on social media and video games, myself included. Like, you know, I use video games as an escape from reality. You know, I'll tune out of the real world and go into my little matrix, just sitting right here, this little white box. You know, I held up a controller for all you people listening. You know, that's my matrix. You know, I enjoy going into those worlds and playing around with that. The same could be said about, you know, social media. People that just sit, constantly flick all day long. You know, back, like, even whenever I was a child, like before the mobile phone, like whenever you met up with a friend, you used to actually play with each other and use your imagination and, you know, like mess about with little figures and things like that. And nowadays, like, kids don't really do that. They just video game or you know, sit in front of dirge on TV, and they don't activate their brains in the same way. That
there's not the same social interaction. It's screen based, and it's also at a remove, I guess. Is that what we're saying?
Like, even books, like, you know, there's lots of kids, but a lot more kids not choosing to read books and using other medias, you know, like YouTube, you know, like back in the day, to learn something, you used to have to go and read about it. Now you can watch, you know, a 10-minute YouTube video or a 3-minute YouTube video on something that you need to, you know, it's kind of like that whole sitting in the chair, plugging in this thing in the back of your head, and hey, I'm going to learn Kung Fu. I'll watch a YouTube video. So, you know,
passive, I think, is maybe the word that we're looking for. It's a passive experience now rather than an active one.
Yeah, like, you know, there's parallels with like what's actually going on right now. Like in that guy's rant, you know, well, I can see things that I was like, hang on. After watching it a second time, I was like, you know, yeah, we did used to have books, good books, and original ideas, and good movies, and people used to talk. Now, yeah, maybe people talk, but they do it through a mobile phone, spitting venom on, you know, tweets and things like that, and, you know, yeah, you know, I can relate to what that guy's trying to say after watching it a second time.
Yeah,
you know, I'm like, yeah, he's right. We did used to be able to be social and read a book and all that stuff.
He also makes a great comment when he's leaving. Once that fight sequence is over, he leaves and he says something like about, I'm off to get my spin off or something.
Yeah.
Is it just a throwaway line at the end of that, which really tickled me when I rewatched it?
A deja vu is usually a glitch in the Matrix. It happens when they change something. One pill makes you small. It happens when they change something. And the mother it happens when they change something. They change something. When she's 10 feet. It happens when they
Why use old code to mirror something new?
Maybe this isn't the story we think it is.
kind of aware how kind of Matrix like our passive experiences right now. Then with us sitting here chatting away via screens, and people passively absorbing all this information by listening to it on their headphones as they walk down the streets on their iPhones.
Yeah,
we have indeed entered Matrix land. There's a hell of a lot to kind of tease out within this film. So one of the things I think we probably need to discuss, I mean, it being CinePunked, it would be wrong of us not to, is the element of nostalgia. I mean, we've talked a little bit about, like, were we ready to come back to this? But the repetition of the first film, which I think, Neil, you've mentioned already, is obviously something that, and we've talked as well about Star Wars a little bit, about how some of those films have been criticized for their aping of the original narratives. I mean, how does this make you feel? How does this make you feel, Ben? I mean, as somebody who games and who games reboots, to actually basically go and do the same film all over again, or do you not feel we've just done the same film all over again?
It's that, well, even Morpheus says, like, you know, a bit of nostalgia is good for the mind, you know, paraphrasing. And he says that in this movie, you know, whenever he's trying to get Neo to accept that, you know, all this crazy stuff in your head is actually real. You know, we thought that would bring you back to a scenario where you were more comfortable. Like, you know, the first time he meets Morpheus and he has that conversation in the hotel room or abandoned house or whatever it was. But then they're in a theater and there's the game playing in the background. Like, reboots, remakes, you know, there's different types. So you've got your graphical enhanced versions, where they change all the assets, which you look at this, it's kind of like that. But then there's the remakes, which re-envision the game, add new things. And I think this is more of a remake rather than a remaster. Right? So a remaster would be just taking the same thing and retexturing it, upgrading the textures, you know, make it look sharper. It does that, but it does a little bit more than that, in my opinion, this movie. You know, there is wee bits that it adds in, looks at it from a different angle compared to the old movies or older movies. So I don't think it's a straight, you know, carbon copy, just updated version. You know, I think there's a little bit of difference in this one.
I suppose, I mean, it's a blurring that seems to be common with a lot of these sort of revisited franchises, especially when there's been a massive gap. Because, I mean, I suppose part of the reason that we end up retreading stuff is because when you've got a franchise that hasn't had a sequel for 20 years or 30 years, or if you were Mary Poppins, 50 years, 60 years, people want to kind of be reminded of the thing that they loved about the first time round. In order for them to accept anything new, in order for them to accept casting changes, which this film has an abundance of, which sort of annoy the hell out of me. The analyst in this himself even references on this as nothing eases anxiety like a little nostalgia, you know, as he's about to do. I think it's him says it when he's about to do things to blow away Trinity or Tiffany when he's teasing him in the workshop.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we deliberately replay this stuff in order that you feel slightly better about it. And I think that is also quite knowing. It's this whole meta about the film where they're aware that people were coming back to the Matrix with a little bit of anxiety about the fact that this was a film that they loved, that then had a couple of sequels that they didn't love so much. A little bit of anxiety about the fact that not both the Wachowskis are involved. It's only Lana this time around. And even the fact that the Wachowskis themselves were not the Wachowskis that they knew of 20 years ago. Yeah. In the sense of, now, I mean, let me explain this bit very, very carefully for anyone who's listening. In the sense that there are some people who really struggle with the idea about trans stuff, who they will then look and say, because the Wachowskis have transitioned from male to female, that they are not the same people. They really seem to struggle with that. Whereas it strikes me that actually one of the underlying messages of The Matrix all along is that actually that person was always there. That person is still there. Those they are still the same person. There's nothing at all that is different.
Well, I think you can look at Agent Smith or Smith that way.
The upgraded version.
That's not the same Smith that we knew from before. It's a completely different Smith, but it is the same.
A little bit too perfect, don't you think?
Yeah, so you can draw parallels with that.
Are any of us the same though? I mean, there was that. There's a couple of comments about Neo, about how obviously he's got older. I wasn't sure about him with the long hair and the beard, but
I think that's the John Wick. I think he's making a new John Wick movie, and he wasn't allowed to cut his hair.
No, because he does still appear completely bald at points in this. All the hair is gone. I mean, they can put stuff on, but there is that sort of uncertainty. There's a point where Trinity actually asks, like, what if I'm not that person anymore?
Yeah.
What if that isn't me? What if I've changed? We all change. If we would look at photographs of us back in 1999, whenever the first film hit cinemas, we are not those people.
I had hair.
Me too.
I don't believe that.
Me too. Like, oh,
you know what I mean? Like, yeah, completely. Nobody stays in stasis. There's a conversation about Morpheus that's actually quite interesting in this regard, in that Niobe is our new general in charge of everything in kind of reality. And by the way, just a shout to that character who is woefully underlooked and such a flippin' kick-ass character throughout all the films. I really like that character. Anyway, that's a complete sidebar. But she says...
Jada Pinkett Smith's Niobe?
Yeah, I really like that character. I just think she's a bit badass. I love it.
Especially in the third one when she's flying that ship.
Yeah.
Like
I think she's a real underappreciated character the whole way along. But in Resurrections, when they talk about they're talking about Morpheus and what happened to him, the Morpheus that we knew. She talks about how he wouldn't progress, because in reality now it's no longer humanity versus machines. Machines and humanity are working together to create a new togetherness and a new world in reality. But Morpheus was so hung up on the idea of the one that it consumed him and took him to his end. And it's like, there are those people who just stick with one position on certain things, whatever it is, if it's religion, it's politics, all those things, and they just stay there and they refuse to move because it's all they choose to believe in. And they can't see, there's no fluidity to them at all. And I think there's just all these little pockets of hints and nods to all of this within the film. I think it's really, really clever.
I was just thinking there about the whole Alice in Wonderland thing. And the what do you call it? The analyst. He's definitely the queen, like off with their heads, and then in the real world, all the sentinels come down and try and get them and things like that. That whole through the looking glass thing as well, like they're jumping through mirrors and in and out of rabbit holes and things like that. It's
we talked about another film fairly recently, didn't we, that was playing on this, about the Alice in Wonderland stuff, and I can't remember which one it was. Labyrinth. So
yeah.
Listening back to that just the other day, our podcast on it, very aware about, and again, it's that whole thing. We come back to this question about what's real and what's fake, and it struck me actually after we did our conversation the other day that in terms of film in particular, we are already talking about worlds of fakery. I mean, the whole filmic process is about, within fiction film in particular, is about creating a construct. It's about making up a whole world that we then buy into and believe.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before. I mean, Ben and I on set for Game of Thrones, like you walk onto set and suddenly you are in Westeros. There is no question about it. You know, you realize that if you go to the other side of the wall, you'll see a pile of scaffolding and it is fake.
Yeah.
But once you go to the other side of the scaffold, you're immersed in that world and you completely believe. If someone gives you a sword and you're like, yep, Dad, I'm here. I'm real. This is all believable.
Whatever you're watching should draw you in.
Yeah.
It should pull you in. So the biggest mistake I ever made was to watch the DVD extras on my Matrix DVD.
Uh-huh.
And see how all the stunt work was done. Like you know, like when a magician does a trick.
Yeah, that illusion is taken away from you, and you're like,
it's completely taken away. It's and it looks like the most basic thing, but in the moment, it looks, you're so blown away by it. I watched the DVD extras on my Matrix DVD, and I was like, oh, okay.
That's disappointing.
That's really upsetting. That there's just like a fella going, right, Keanu needs to go up, does he? All right. Like that. You know, like
I don't know. I mean, for me, it doesn't. What it makes me do is marvel at the creation process even more. That they're able, that this stuff in that time that I'm watching the stuff, it looks so amazing, and I'm still able, even films I know how they're done on the couple of productions I've actually worked on, that I've been on set for, I'm able to watch those films and still be completely immersed in that world. And that, I suppose, is the filmic experience. But what it does is it creates this other level of artifice. So essentially you've got a film that's about a battle between reality and fiction. And in terms of a filmic construct, they're all fake. And even the real world, the supposed real world, we know as viewers, is a construct of fiberglass and CGI. It is not a real world either. The real world that they come into is not a real world. It's a fictional thing, but we're able to buy into that. And
apart from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which I believe is a documentary.
We'll get into Neil's Jessica Rabbit fixation in a future episode. But there is something there about that, I think, in terms of like where we draw lines. I mean, in terms of our own worlds. I mean, Ben, you've already picked up on the social media aspect and the criticisms and the observations that are being made within the film about that.
I don't think it's just on social media as well. Like this idea has just popped into my head. Like the whole thing with lockdown.
Yeah.
And being stuck in a little pod, a jelly pod, running on a treadmill, doing the same thing every day, day in, day out. Like, I think that you can take that from this movie as well. You know, this whole lockdown thing and being isolated, and
it's scarily prescient, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
How the heck? I mean, like this presumably that wasn't rewritten in terms of what has happened.
That had to be influenced by what was going on in nowadays.
I'm not 100% certain how late into production that was added in, because this film was in production before lockdown.
Yeah.
Before the pandemic hit properly. So it's definitely a strange thing, but it does feel very much like it's commenting on what's happening now.
Yeah.
Is that not because that's what we bring to it as well? Our lived experience is what we bring to the film, so we can see those things.
Absolutely. I mean, that's true of any cinema experience that we have, any film experiences, that we are always influenced by our own experiences. We project, particularly when film's working well, we project our lives onto that. We're trying to find characters that we can identify with, or we're trying to find moments that we can gel with. But the same way, I've made this observation before. If you watch two films back to back, that will influence how you view each of the films, because you're not just watching a film isolated. Everything we see is in context of something else. Yeah. Which is why sometimes you'll watch a film and you're really into it, but you might watch it in our time and you really can't get into it at all, because either something else has happened, or you're in a state of mind, or you've seen something else that happens to change how you perceive it. It is a strange thing. There's a few other clues, I think, that are laid in this in terms of what is real and what isn't real, and about our perception of it. I noticed, like, going into it very early on, there's a few kind of giveaways that the whole thing's faked. Like he's sitting staring out. I mean, apart from the Simulate Cafe, which is a great pun, but does sound rather like somewhere you'd find in a game. There's the whole thing about there's a line where he's talking to the to his boss, to Smith, before Smith is revealed as Smith, looking outside at San Francisco, and it's like it's so perfect, it's got to be fake, which I had glossed over first time around. Second time I'm like, yeah, it's fake, it's all fake, it's never that perfect.
Well, there's even the guy Jude.
Yes.
Well, like, he was like, I was brought up by machines.
Yep, I was the next line I was going to come to. I was raised by machines.
Yeah,
also, yeah, which I missed first time round.
Yeah, entirely. Me too.
You're like,
then I'm like, he's a handler, of course.
I mean, there's the one hand, which is a comment on the fact that we grew up now in a generation, we're in a world where, as you've already said, Ben, like, kids are screen based. I mean, it's not that kids live on screens, but their education is all screen based. So we are brought up on machines in a way that I think the three of us weren't. I think Ben was maybe a little bit more than me, but
I was definitely a little bit more than you. But even then, like, from when technology has really started to move, like, technology moved really quickly.
Yeah,
like from I remember the first time that the computer got brought into the house. And then to what we've got now, like, that's a really short space of time. Even you think about dial-up, and then the technology evolved from dial-up to which can be drawn in from Wi-Fi. We can connect to Wi-Fi anywhere we go, which I suppose can also be drawn from this movie. They used to have to run to a telephone box. Now they can do whatever and connect. Drop in and out wherever they so choose. Like Wi-Fi, we're always connected. We've got internet wherever we go. So yeah. This is crazy.
Deus Ex Machina. Is a phrase I think we should probably address as well. Neil, you had the description for me before we were doing the pod there.
Yeah, so because the gaming company, the gaming company is not called Deus Ex Machina. The gaming company that Mr. Anderson works for is Deus Machina, which is something that I didn't really take in the first time round. So what happens?
Ben is just showing us the screen there. What's that? Deus Ex?
Deus Ex, a game?
Yeah,
it's a game.
The idea of what's it? The idea of God within the machine. But the definition I find is a person or thing that appears.
Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, a person or thing that appears or is introduced into a situation suddenly and unexpectedly, and provides an artificial or contrived solution to an apparently insolvable difficulty. Every interview that I've heard Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss do for this movie, the first thing that any interviewer says to them is, at the end of Matrix Revolutions, you were both dead. So how are we here? And the answer is Deus Ex Machina. The whole thing is contrived to bring them back. Like, it's there. Like, there's a blooming light up sign which is lit green underneath. Like, there's green like uplighters in the blooming offices, which I only twigged onto this time round. That's how you escape the seemingly inescapable problem. Is Deus Ex Machina, or in the gaming term, Deus Machina. Like, that's why we're saying earlier, everything is in there for a specific reason. Is it simulate or stimulate?
It's simulate.
I thought it was stimulate. I even
which is a really good coffee pun.
Yeah,
in itself.
But yeah,
can we get away with doing that? CinePunked, like Stimulate cafes.
Stimulate cafes.
Watch a film, have a coffee,
put on movie nights,
have a chat.
We should. But yeah, that whole construct exists to get them out of the problem of having a fourth film. And then there's the lovely moment where they sit round and they do the focus group about writing this fictional fourth game.
Mm-hmm.
And what is it about it? And it's about
some of that really annoys me. But I did appreciate the Scottish guy's t-shirt with the joust t-shirt.
Is it a popular game, is it?
It's a game that came out in the Sega.
Okay.
So I still have a copy of it. Yeah. It's a great wee game.
All those explanations of what the Matrix was, is, and should be.
And
I was like, did they just lift a load of comments from Reddit? Do you know, I was like, have you actually gone and lifted stuff that people have said? Because they get into this, they do actually genuinely have a discussion around, well, the Matrix is all about cryptocurrency and crypto fascism. And it's all about it's an anti-capitalist thing. And no, it's about the trans thing. And they do all that within it.
I mean, it's very clearly a self-aware moment about the fandom that is built up over it and the conversations that have been facilitated over the years. I mean, that meta element is sort of the bit that almost pulls me out, because it's just so knowing and so self-aware, and a bit.
Even the parent company for the gaming companies, Warner Brothers,
yeah. And they have the conversation about they said they would do it with or without us.
Yeah.
You're like, is this actually the conversation that you had? I mean, it's fair enough. I mean, one of the things I kind of, having my schoolboy Latin, if I can remember it enough, I think there's a subtle difference as well, though, within rather than Deus Ex Machina, which is the God from the machine, the Deus Machina sounds more like God machine. You know, you're removing the from. Which is also a kind of a very self-aware fact that this company is the creator of worlds. I mean, that's what a god does.
Yeah.
So it's I mean, everything is very clearly labeled as this means something. This means something. This means something. This is what our construct is.
And to go back, to him as the kind of savior, they make him in this the creator.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so there's an interesting line across there where he is the creator, he being Neo, Mr. Anderson, he is the creator of worlds, he is the god, if you choose to use that language, and the whole way through the original trilogy he was the designated savior.
Well, I mean, it's I mean, that itself is very definitely on the Christian Trinity, isn't it? You know, where you've got the three. We need the film where Neo's a ghost, then, really, to make everything completely.
But is that not Morpheus?
That's what I was going to say.
Morpheus is the ghost.
Is he? I suppose he is. But then Morpheus isn't the Christ. If Morpheus is the John the Baptist figure, he can't also be the Christ.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we're already cast him in our nativity.
But then, I mean, but Trinity's nature is so we I mean, this pod has gone on considerably longer than I thought it might, so apologies to listeners.
Sorry,
who've got one of our rare epics. Trinity herself, though, I mean, apart from the fact that her name is a giveaway as to the religious allegory of the whole films, she's literally called Trinity. We talked a little bit about her being a kind of another, about her role within this. I mean, is she the one? Clearly, she's an important part of the narrative. Any thoughts or any jumping off points for conversation on that one?
I read an article, and if I can find it again, I'll send you it so we can put it in like show notes or whatever. But it was a very dismissive article, quite well written, but very blunt. And it talked about the feminization of these returning intellectual properties, using Matrix Resurrections as an example, also using Star Wars, and also because the internet just will not leave it alone, the 2016 Ghostbusters.
Bloody good film.
Enjoyed that. Anyway, let's not go down that wormhole. But it basically was an article which said that all they are doing is they are moving films into the idea of a feminist film now is you make the same film, but you make all the male characters you watched women.
Yeah.
So in the context of the Matrix film, they turn Trinity into the one at the end, because that's what this like, has there ever been, well, I was going to say a broader brush, but it might be an incredibly narrow brush drawn across a point. Like I kind of read it in disbelief, and I kind of went, you didn't watch the same film I did.
No.
Now, there's lots.
They're one together though.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think there's something valid that in the argument that says that if all you are doing in your film is switching the genders around, that is not. I mean, that actually it probably is quite a poor attempt at at being a feminist film. That is literally that feels to me like lip service, because the whole narrative structure and messaging should change. It's not enough just to have a female lead.
It was an article that kind of pointed to that, but it also kind of more widely went down the why you turn all my favorite characters into women.
Which is in the context of the Matrix is obviously fascinating because of our the trans issues that are within there. I mean, so we'll start with a point. Is Trinity the one? Ben, you just said something about this.
So, well, the point that the movie makes, well, what I read from it is they're the one together. Like they can't be. They're more powerful together than apart.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, I think it's their love for each other or whatever. Sappy crap like that. I don't get why it is that way.
I find that kind of fascinating in the sense that there is one actual relationship we see on screen in this film, and it is the one between Neo and Trinity. And it is presented as a traditional heterosexual relationship. And I find that fascinating, because if you're talking about lefty wokey bollocks, that is not the relationship that you then expect to see on screen. If this was a lefty wokey film, the central characters would not be a standard heterosexual relationship.
Yeah, true.
Neil?
I think there's actually there's breadcrumbs the whole way along when you see in the first film she saves him when he gets shot. In the second film he saves her and reaches like inside to remove the bullet that she gets shot with. She is having these dreams, particularly in the second movie and in this movie, of prophecies, things to come. And I'm like, how can she be doing that if this is all a computer program? How can you see the program ahead? How do you do that? In the third one, there is a moment of sacrifice where he is completely blinded. She flies them to Machine City. They crash, and she is like, that is a moment of sacrifice. They are intertwined in a way that you may not appreciate watching the films individually, but when you have done the three back to back like I did and then watched this twice, there is a moment where you go, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. This has been here the whole blooming time. And now you get to the end of this fourth film and basically they go, ta-da, in a brilliant moment. And I
love that Superman moment.
Yeah.
With Trinity at the end. She with the analyst and they somehow that big explosion happens, and then she flies down, and all I just see is Superman.
Yeah, there's a moment where when they are doing the very, very, which I still don't quite understand, they're doing the very complicated unplugging of her from her cell in the machine and plugging Bugs in, and they are kind of switching bodies.
Yeah.
There is a moment in that where her body kind of expands out, and the Trinity's body in the Matrix expands out several times. She lets out a yell, and the analyst has this look of, oh shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's a moment of her being free within the machine world. I think that's a moment of the analyst going, oh, it's all unlocked now. Everything's done now. They then connect hands across the crowd. There is an explosion. There is a massive... what we haven't talked about is Neo's wonderful ability to do the old Ken and Ryu Hadoukens in this movie. But there's that on an epic scale, and they blow apart the crowd, and it's just the two of them, and the connection is made again.
Isn't it a Michelangelo fresco where you've got the two fingers that are coming together?
Man. Yeah.
Is that not like Adam and God or whatever?
This is I should have done my research on this one and tried to remember all the things you know when you're younger that you forget as your brain gets old.
I think that just that hint has always been there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's something that only...
Yeah, you're right, Ben. It's the creation of Adam.
Yeah.
And it is Michelangelo.
It gets revealed, and in a standalone film, if you take Matrix Resurrections as a standalone film...
Terrible idea. Don't do it.
But it's a jarring moment.
Uh-huh.
But if you watch the flow of the four together, I think it's not as big a shock as, like, if I hadn't have done the rewatch of the first three films and then went to the cinema and just watched this on its own, I'd be like, why have they done that? That's strange.
Because my friend watched this, and I don't know if he rewatched the first three before watching the fourth one, but he was like, don't waste your time. It's rubbish. I've watched it twice now, and it's pretty good.
It's definitely not rubbish.
It's definitely not rubbish.
I didn't expect to get as much out of it as I have. For me, I think the two characters is not just that they kind of are important to each other and they have a sort of symbiotic relationship. And I'm assuming as well that in itself is part of the... I'm assuming, and I'm sure somebody else can point me to some copy on this, that is central to this whole issue about the trans relationship and allegory. But there's this wonderful moment after they've connected in the Matrix where they're back on the ship and the two of them see each other in the flesh, really, for the first time in years. And the two of them are standing there and they are the same person. You look at how they are dressed with their shaven heads, and he's all clean shaven. They're wearing the same tatty clothes. They have very similar kind of builds in this moment, and it's like you realize that there's an androgyny about it, about both of them. I mean, there's a like a mirroring that is going on within the two of them, and you realize that. I mean, for me, in that moment, watching that, I feel that the gender constructs completely are meaningless. I feel that the idea of them as being separate people is sort of meaningless, and that you realize that it does take the two of them together. And then they're watched by this kind of like group of disciples who are sitting looking at them and going, oh, aren't they cute? They're together. This is how it should be. Give them a bone. I don't know. There's just other stuff at play, and I feel that, you have this conversation with somebody else, you watch this film again, and there's going to be more stuff that just gets teased out every single time. There's two more things I want to kind of touch on before we wrap up this conversation. We're going to have to wrap it up because we can't talk all day as much as the two of you want to. There's two things that we mentioned in our conversation the other day I want to come back to. One is the notion of the zombies.
Mm-hmm.
So, zombies in this film.
Yeah. The last kind of big action sequence of this film made me think of zombie films, and I think primarily because of how it is shot. So when it's all kicking off, which is the technical term, at the end of this film, they use it in Hollywood all the time. Kicking off, yeah. When it's all kicking off at the end of this film, the system activates what it has referred to on several occasions as swarm mode, which means it basically and simultaneously infects every person within the simulation and sends them to kill a chosen subject or remove a problem. And that's the point where it becomes a zombie film, because
is it not the bots?
I think it's the bots. There's a mention of the bots.
Because if it was everyone, obviously not the people that are hooked up, because there was that the bit when your man jumps out the window and he's in bed with the woman. She's like, no, she's a real person that's hooked up to the Matrix, but I think he's a bot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Because the way they said, their way of getting round planting or having agents was to
put bots in.
Put all these bots everywhere and just clothe them as normal people, and then they can flip the switch and they do their bidding.
Has this just undermined what you were about to say, Neil?
No, no, it has just kept it accurate. All the bots appear and are very zombie-like in how they. Well, they are and they aren't in terms of how they move. I mean, there has been a debate for a long time about how quickly does a zombie move in zombie films.
You've got the walkers and you've got the sprinters.
Yeah,
it's slowly. I'm not a modern zombie film person.
Are you not an infected kind of person? I think the infected are way more terrifying than a slow.
No, I see. I'm part of that hare and the tortoise kind of mentality, which is like you basically whenever you've got a slow infection thing,
slow terror.
Yeah, but people also get complacent because they think, sure, I've got half an hour before they get here. But what you've done is like while you're watching that guy trundling up for half an hour, there's somebody comes along behind you and like gets you and you're least expecting it. Or they've bitten your friend who doesn't say.
Always say, come on.
Just
always check.
But we end up in a zombie movie increasingly because of how it's shot, how it looks. Everybody becomes kind of faceless. It's more kind of silhouettes chasing you than it feels actual people or bots. And it just to go back to what Ben was saying earlier about the technology, this for me was a bit of a metaphor for social media pylons, particularly when they start throwing themselves out of windows into the street to try and stop them, because it's like, these people are trying to do something different in our world, get them. And they just start coming from everywhere and on top of them, and boom, from cars and into buses and every shape. And they also, in terms of the zombie thing, they're very they seem to want to just rip apart those that are in there, Neo, Trinity, all those other ship captains that travel into the Matrix for this last mission. They don't seem to want to like capture them.
No,
they just seem to want to get them and then just rip them apart, and it's quite violent. In
you just turn into feral beasts.
Yeah, there's a couple of sequences where they are on top of the cars trying to get into a couple of the characters who, forgive me, that is one thing about the film. There's some of those characters that are very forgettable and very those crew members who I can't for the life of me think of their names. But they're trying to get some of those. They're coming in through the car windows. It's very violent. You see her in the chair and the blood coming from her mouth. And it is, there's a certain amount of distress there and violence. So yeah, it does become a bit of a zombie thing. Or similar to. I don't know what you think, but similar.
Oh yeah, it's definitely similar to a zombie thing. It's similar to any zombie game. Like I play a game called Days Gone, and there's hordes of zombies that just trundle along, looking for their wee meal, and then they spot the meal and they bolt at you, and you're like,
very genteel though.
You're like, oh shit, I need to get out of here before I get annihilated by 100 zombies. That's what this felt like to me at the end anyway. And then the whole jumping out a window, which really, like, the first time I seen that, like, you see a wee glimmer of it. Yeah. And when Trinity's telling you about the flashback or the dream that she has, you're like, wait, did that was it? Because initially I thought that was Neo or someone getting dumped into that car. I didn't realize that was some, like, a bot in swarm mode that had just jumped out a window and hit that car. It's quite gruesome when you think about it.
I mean, for me, that just reminded me of the footage from 9/11 with people jumping out of the World Trade Towers as planes hit, which, for a while after was such a taboo kind of area to go into. But that was also very much part of the times in which these films came out first time round. And
well, even whenever they're on the roof, like, I think the whole thing about the people jumping out of the World Trade was they wanted to go on their terms, not to be taken by fire or whatever. And
desperation and everything. I mean,
and then you've got Trinity and Neo on the roof, and they're like, right, well, we're either going to fly or we're going to fall, but at least they'll be on our terms. And they jump, they make that leap of faith.
Do you remember how you got here? You've lost your capacity to discern reality from fiction. What's real is here and now. 6:28 p.m. Anything else is just your mind playing tricks on you. It becomes a problem when fantasies endanger us. We don't want anyone to get hurt, do we?
One other thing I kind of want to touch on. Neil made an observation the other day about Zion and Io.
It's always interesting to me in these films when things are given particular names. So humanity no longer lives in Zion in this film. They live in Io, which is kind of a reductive Zion, in that in one way all you're doing is chopping off the Z and the N. But it's also there is also, because when this happens, of course, what does Neil do? Neil goes to Google, and there is within Greek mythology, Zeus falls in love with a human woman,
Io the cow.
Yeah. So his wife, Zeus's wife, becomes jealous of this love.
Yeah.
Zeus turns Io into a cow, and his wife sends a fly to attack, to bite this cow every day of its life. And I went, okay, that's interesting, but I can't make any connection to that in terms of the story. As interesting as it, because I love a wee bit of Greek mythology.
Always yeah. Yep. I'm with you there, 100%.
So, but then I went, right, well, if we're talking about binary, if we're doing the reduction thing, and he's designing this game called Binary, and we're talking about binary choices. Maybe it's not I-O. Maybe it's a
1 0
and a 0.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is power on, power off. You know, even like you think of your kettle at home, like that's how it's written, I-O on your kettle. It's another binary within a film and a collection of films that is talking about binary choices. And the binary this time is that perhaps can you tell I'm just kind of just like working this out?
I'm intrigued to see. I mean, I can hear the cogs working away. So go ahead.
The new binary that exists within this city is that the machines are now part of it. And another part of the new binary that exists within this, there is a through line of food in this film that I find quite interesting, and in terms of technology as well. One of the binaries that exists in this new city is that they're not quite sure what they want to be, because they're not a fully human city, they're not a fully mechanized city. And part of what they're doing as part of working in conjunction with machinery now is they are trying to recreate food that exists within the Matrix, because food only really has a taste within the Matrix. If you think back to Cypher sitting in the first movie eating that steak and having a conversation about going, I know this doesn't taste of anything, but God, it feels good.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, Neo eats a steak very early on when he's going through his
mental episode
and his Groundhog Day sequence very early on in the film as well. So there's a steak thing there. Then you get to Io, and you're sitting with this recreation of strawberries because they're trying to capture the flavor of something which didn't exist in the first place.
That's interesting.
It's a very interesting way of, I think that whole city is built on, we're not really sure what this is yet. It's almost like a halfway house between the two worlds.
It's neither on or off.
Yeah.
It's
so it's Io, it's sitting in the middle.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, for them to have like both the
I did it. I got a theory.
Hey, if it have the creatures and the robots and the people living side by side, I mean, it can't be an either or. It can't be a binary existence.
Yeah,
because binary is a choice.
It's a purple pill.
It's a purple pill.
It's a purple pill city.
Yeah. But the other thing that struck me about the symbolism of that is like removing the Z and the N from the name meant that you've given this no beginning and no end. This is where I was going with this the other day.
Oh, yeah.
Is that actually you've redefined it by removing it in terms of a creation story, in terms of like a looping narrative and a treadmill and stuff. I wonder, is that also part of that choice? Part of the creative choice about the films, about the message that it's trying to give us, and also in terms of an evangelical kind of theological perspective.
Yeah.
Alphas and omegas, beginnings and ends, God creatures. There has to be just a constant. Well, look, gents. I mean, do we feel we have explored sufficient Matrix territory today?
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
I think we've explored enough for listener tolerance levels.
Well, we've explored enough to spark a conversation
that we could go on and on about. But I think for the sake of anybody listening, I think maybe this is the point where we unplug.
We may have found a film that actually has. This occasionally happens, where you find a film that prompts far more conversation than you expect it to.
Yeah.
And I think Matrix Resurrections has been one of those ones that we went in with very mixed expectations, and it has stimulated far more debate on and off recording than any of us expected. And I hope that people give it the chance, and that if you've watched any of the Matrix films, that you go in and you give it a go and see what you feel about it yourselves.
Yeah, don't let the algorithm put you off. Sometimes I feel the algorithm of social media pushes the negative to the top. Oh, which again is something that gets commented on about feelings. They're so much easier to control than facts. The analyst says that at some point. And I think that's a bit of a social media thing too, where the negativity around this film will push it up your social media feed a little bit more than the positivity thing. And I think there's far more positive things and intuitive things to be said about this film than quite simply they made it a woman. Don't like it. 1 star, letterboxd.
I think it's a good movie, and it's well worth a watch. But I would say watch the other ones before you watch it, because it'll take you on a wee ride.
I'm not going to better it'll take you on a wee ride in the way that Ben just said that. It's the most Northern Irish thing to kind of comment. Gents, thank you very much for joining me, and for listeners and watchers at home, I hope you've enjoyed this. So this is CinePunked. If you got anything out of any of our stuff, do hit the subscribe button, do comment to us on social media. You'll find us across different platforms. We're on YouTube's, Facebook, Instagram, and also on our website www.cinepunked.com. We'll catch us again very, very soon. Until then, adios.
Bye-bye.
Bye.